Right, so today we're doing a GS400. This is a USDM or US domestic market, 98 to 2000, and this one's going into a US IS300 from 02 to 05. So let's do this. Right, so as discussed, this is a GS400. It's a US model. It's a 98 to 2000 1UZ VVT-i. It's going into an IS300 that is a 02 to 05. And in this case, it is using a manual gearbox for the setup. So what we're going to do, first of all, is we're just going to cut through to some pictures so you can see the process that we go through when we use one of the original harnesses and we adapt it, because we don't usually show you guys photos of that, but I thought I'll put some in there for this one. And then what we'll do is we'll carry on with the layout of the system. So let's do that quickly, and then we'll come back and do the layout. Right, okay, so as you can see nicely, we've stripped everything down, we've removed everything that's no longer necessary before we added a little bit extra in and made all the adaptations over there, and then the complete photos will be at the end of the video so you can see all of those, okay. Right, so starting with the layout, and then we'll do the testing with the actual engine running, so we will get into that. But for the layout, I do apologize, it is a little bit of a mess in here, but that's because we're trying to adapt an IS200 over to an IS300 to then plug into the harness over here. So as you can see, we've got a double patch where these are the IS200 plugs going into where we've adapted to IS300, which then goes into the patch, which then pops into the ECU over there, okay. Now then, we've got the body plugs themselves. Now in the case of the IS300, you have the 4 body plugs. You've got this one, which goes into the gray section. You've got that one, which goes slightly above it. We've got this little plug, which goes into there. And then we've got the other plug, which then plugs into the unit, which normally goes over there. Okay, so you do get 4 plugs with the IS300 US, and normally where you get 3 with the IS200. Okay, right, so those are the body plugs there that you'll have to plug in. Attached to the harness, we've then got the MPX device. So this is what's helping us to convert the signals over to the dash, so they work from the GS400 ECU to the IS200/300. We've then got our ATEMU device, or automatic transmission emulator. Now that's obviously emulating all the automatic gearbox codes because this is running a manual, so that keeps all the codes away and makes sure she's running correctly. We do also have the resistors in. Now, because this is a US model 1UZ VVT-i, it will actually throw codes for SLU, SLN, and SLT. Hence the reason why we have actually included the resistors in this particular case. Just so, if you've seen us before with the 1UZ VVT-i, especially the European versions, they don't throw codes for these particular ones, and they don't cause a check engine light, but on US ones, they do that as well. And also, just to make you aware, Jerry, we have actually wired in the secondary Lambda sensor, the single one that goes right at the back there. So you are required just to wire the one in. We've actually split the signals to go to both sections on here. So effectively, that one sensor will supply both secondary sensors. Again, it's a US thing. Unfortunately, the US ECUs, they will throw a code for the secondary oxygen sensors, and so we have to wire them in to make sure that that all does work. Okay, so that's the only 2 things that you need to know about having that one secondary Lambda sensor in, and obviously these resistors, which once you have it inside here, can be mounted just on the top of the strut here or somewhere like that, just out of the way. They get too hot to live inside the ECU box, and that's the reason why they're on the outside. Okay. Right, so you've got that, and then lastly, you've got all of your ECU plugs in here. Again, each one can only go into one scenario, but you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here, and then you've got number 6 at the side over there. Sorry, this light I think is a bit brighter. Okay, so that is the whole ECU box itself. Obviously, in your car, it'll look a lot neater than this because you won't have this in the way, and you won't have this little patch harness in the way over there. Okay, so once we get out of there, we have the grommet, which then goes into the space over here where it's designed for. It's then going to come along here and go into the plastic section over there. So some of you may notice, our sort of European visitors, we never got the GS400 in the UK or Europe. So effectively, this is like a 3UZ front harness. on a 1UZ VVT-i. There was a Japanese one, which was a Crown, which had the exact same setup. The only difference between the Crown and the GS is the Crown had the 3UZ style coils. So if you watch a lot of Calvin cartoons videos, you'll see he comes across a lot of Crowns. So he has 1UZ VVT-is that look like they're a 3UZ, and they use the 3UZ coils, whereas your American version has the same coils as the LS400, so these big coils like this. And most importantly, they use the same bullet style math as a 1UZ LS400. So just bear that in mind. Not every time you get a harness that looks like this and it's a 1UZ, is it going to be a Crown and it's going to have those coils with the small math. If it's a GS400, it's going to have the big coils and it's going to have the big math like that. Okay, so just bear that in mind. So as we say, when we always tell people we need to know exactly what we're dealing with, these are the reasons why. There are a few little niggles and differences between the different variations of the models, and that's even within one sort of family, if you will. Even in the 1UZ VVT-i, there can be subtle variations and differences with how they operate. Okay, right, so once we get to this piece of plastic over here, which is bolted down there and there, the harness is going to split. So we have a section going off here and we have a section going off there. I'm going to start on the section going this way, and popping out of this little first clip over here, we've got our oil control valve. So that's this one over here. It also pops out and it goes to our accelerator position sensor. So again, these are drive-by-wire. So this one over here is your accelerator position sensor. That's where your cable goes. So this is where sometimes the confusion is. People think they're not drive-by-wire, but they are drive-by-wire. Calvin did a good video, so if I have a link, I'll put it up in the top there for you so you can see exactly what I mean. Pardon me. Right. Also coming out here is the TPS. So on a 1UZ VVT-i, this is actually the TPS. It's just a sub harness built in. There's your TPS down there and the plug's all the way down there. So it'd be nigh on impossible to get to it if you wanted to pull the harness off without taking the throttle off. So Toyota made a little sub harness that comes up to there and plugs in directly to there. Okay. Then the harness comes down along here, and you'll see if you look underneath here, there's a little bracket over there that the harness can clip into over there. And as it comes down here, it breaks out into two sections. One is your drive-by-wire motor, which is that one over there. The other one is the cam sensor at the front of the engine, and that's that one over there. And then again, as per usual, you've got your two holes there and there. So your harness can clip into there like that. Once it comes around there, then it's going to split off and go into your aircon. Okay, so that's your aircon. It'll plug into the aircon pump there. All right. And then it's going to split into two over here. One is going to come down through there, all the way through to there, and that's going to end up at your crank sensor, sorry, over the bottom over there, okay? The other part that breaks off goes to your oil switch. Now, in this case, the reason we break it off here is, as you know, with the GS400, your sump is at the front. This is an LS430 motor, so it's got this sort of mid/rear sump, if you want to call it that. Now, obviously, also, it has the oil filter housing, which pops forward, whereas on the GS400, yours points backwards. So we split the oil up here because that's going to come, again, through this hole, but then out here and then into the oil pressure switch, which goes down over there. Okay. All right. Well, actually, some go through there. Some can go straight over the top from there. It's completely up to you guys. You decide where you want to go from there. All right, but those are the three sections over there. Right, so that's this whole section over here that I've covered. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make our way back over there. Oh, and I nearly forgot, sorry. This one is where you have injector 1 and coil 1. So bearing in mind, if I haven't mentioned it, I do apologize if I have already, but this is cylinder 1, 3, 5, and 7. That is cylinder 2, 4, 6, and 8. So you always, the way you look at the cylinders is from the driver's position, aka from the back of the engine. This is the left bank. That is the right bank. Left bank is odd, 1, 3, 5, 7. Right bank is even, 2, 4, 6, and 8. Okay, just so that you know where the cylinders are and what they're labeled as. Right, so there you had that, which is, so you've got injector 1 and coil 1 coming out of there. Then coming around here, you've got a small little open section here. So you can see, obviously, we've taped it up there. And then we get to our next piece of plastic, and that's going to be bolted on there and there. Now, this has 3 breakout points over here. First one, we've got injector 3 and coil 3. We've also got the cam sensor for the left bank, which goes over there. So just remember the 1UZ VVT-i and the 3UZ VVT-i, they have 3 cam sensors. They've got one here, one over the other side, and they've got one at the front. Okay, so these are designed to measure the VVT-i or the degrees of the cams. That's these 2 over here, and then that one is just for synchronization for spark, so it knows engine position. Okay, right, moving along. Next one that breaks out is going to be injector 5 and coil 5. little bit further along, it's going to break out to injector 7 and coil 7 from there. Okay. Then at the top here, it just has a little bend, so obviously it goes open and there's no plastic on there. And then we get into the rear, which is a nice big piece of plastic over here. And that is where all of your stuff is then going to go around to that side over there. What we're going to do first of all is we're going to come down to here because we do have a breakout over here. So if you have a look down at the bottom here, you have a little breakout section. And what comes out here is we've got the earth strap, which goes along over there. So I do apologize. I think this light's a bit bright. I don't know what it's going to look like on the video, but anyway. In our case, because we've got an earth strap on here, we've put this up top, but in your case, Jerry, this is actually going to go down to this one. You will only have the two M8 bolts that go at the back here. These M6 are used for 3UZ, so you won't have these. So your earth straps are going to go into the one slightly lower down, okay? Just so you know that. Right, so that's your earth strap that comes out there. The next one is going to be your reverse switch. So in this case, all we've done is, because they're using a non-Toyota gearbox, we've just put a DTM plug so that the customers can effectively just add their thing onto the whatever reverse switch they have from there. And then just remember that on the IS 200s and 300s, if they are an auto model, okay, so if they're originally an automatic, they will have the speed signal from the ABS ECU, okay? If they were a manual, they have the speed signal from the ABS. They have the speed signal from the gearbox. Okay, so they actually had a speed sensor on the gearbox, and that went into here, and then it went over to the cluster to read the speed. Okay, so just bearing in mind, if you guys are originally working with an auto vehicle, as long as you keep the ABS ECU, speed is not a problem. So if you are using CD009s, BMW gearboxes, you don't have to stress. If you're originally a manual, and you're using a BMW or CD009, luckily there's a very quick and easy way to do it because they kept the same ABS ECUs and the clocks work exactly the same way, or the clusters work exactly the same way. So all you've got to do is add in the single one wire from the ABS ECU to the cluster, and then you get your speed back. Okay, so speed is never a major issue as long as you have your ABS ECU. Okay. Right, the next one coming out of here is going to be your Lambda sensor. So that comes down over there. Now, again, guys, there is a metal shield that goes between the block and also this goes between here, so it actually protects the connector. Please make sure you do put that in, otherwise this is going to be literally an inch and a half away from the exhaust, and it's going to last all of 5 seconds where it's going to melt. So please make sure you do put that heat shield back in, so at least your plug will last longer than 5 minutes. All right. Okay, so that's what's going to come out the bottom over here. Coming out of the bottom of the actual inlet over there is going to be the sub harness, which plugs into your knock sensors and your starter solenoid. And that is what this plug over here is. And that just plugs in to the plug sticking at the top of the plastic over there. Okay. And then lastly, you've got your main power cable for your starter motor, which then pops out over there. Now, obviously, Jerry, in your case, you're American, so you'll have left-hand drive. So your battery, you'll see here, if you look at the brackets, they're designed for both left and right-hand drive. So when you are left-hand drive, the starter wire goes that way. When you're right-hand drive, the starter wire comes out the top like that and over to the battery over here. Okay. Obviously, the ECU boxes all stay in the same place. So it doesn't matter whether it's left or right-hand drive. It's all the same. So that's not the major issue. That's where your difference lies, because the cable has to go either to that side or over to this side. Okay. Now that I've done that, I'm going to scoot around the other side, and then I'm going to be able to carry on from there. Right, so we've got coming around here, and then you see down here we've got another little breakout coming out the bottom, and that's to your other earth strap that goes there. Again, in this case, we've just put on the M6 because we have it there, and it's originally a 3UZ engine, so the holes are nice and clean. If you look down over here, you'll see we've got an M8 nut over there. So that's where you would put your one, because you have, if you have a look at your hole, it's an M8 hole in your ring on your end of your wire, and that's going to fit into there. Okay. Right, but coming to the end of here now. Oh, sorry, I will mention as well that you can see down here that this is where your black piece of plastic is going to mount to, and then you also have another one down in there. Okay, right, and that's where the two mounting points are. Okay, so as I come out of here, we're then going to see injector 8 and coil 8. It's going to come a little bit more forward, and then once it's here, it's going to break out to your ACIS, or acoustic control induction system plug. And that goes on there. So you've got that over there. And then you're going to have injector 6 and coil 6. Then it's going to come a little bit more forward to here, and it's going to break out to go to your cam sensor for your right bank. It's going to have injector 4 and coil 4. And just remember, you've got these little mounting points here and here on the fuel rail, so you can use P-clamps just to hold the harness up like that. But then coming to the front here, it's going to come to about here, and it's going to break out to quite a few things. You're going to have injector 2 and coil 2. We're going to have the coolant temp sensor over there. Now, bearing in mind on your one, you won't see this little temperature sensor that I've put in. You've got a little blanking bolt in there, perfectly normal, don't stress about that. Then also we have the oil control valve for the right bank. And then we have finally the mass airflow sensor. Okay, so just remember that these use this style of mass airflow sensor. I call it the bullet style because if you have a look, it kind of looks like a bullet. So just remember the other side of this is completely blank and this side has the holes in it. So if you put this the wrong way around and the car won't start, just check that, because that's a nice easy check, and if your car, again, it will make your car not start basically because it's not actually calculating the airflow into the engine like that. Okay, then lastly, coming down here, it's going to come around here and you can sort of tuck it away however you want. It's going to come down here by the alternator, it's going to break off, and then we've got our alternator plug over here, so that's your 3-pin plug that goes in the back of the alternator. We've then got our oil level plug. So again, as per usual, the sump would normally be at the front and your oil level plug would just plug into the sensor that's right here. And then lastly, you've got your oxygen sensor over here. Okay, and that's going all the way to the back over there. Right, so other things that you need to connect, you've got your alternator plug. So I'm talking about your main thick alternator cable. That's obviously going to come from here. And obviously on the US models, your fuse box, because your left-hand drive, sorry, I shouldn't say US, I mean left-hand drive models, your battery and your fuse box are up here. So it's a really nice short run from here to here. But you have pretty much the same setup. So effectively you've got this little bolt over here, and that's where your alternator goes into. So 3 thick cables that you're joining to the engine. Number 1 is your earth strap. So again, it's going to be negative of battery, underneath the battery, bolted to chassis, chassis to block. So in your case, on that side, okay? Alternator cable, again, straight from your fuse box, straight to your alternator over there, straight bolts on. Lastly, you're going to have your main starter, which goes from there to your actual starter motor underneath, okay? And then well, it should still already be there, but this is the one powering your fuse box from the positive battery. So again, everything's just on that side over there basically, but it's all a very similar setup, okay? So those are the ones that you have to attach main on that one. The rest is obviously all just plugging into here. All right, okay, so that is the complete layout. So what I'm going to do now is we've already tested everything. I'm just going to make sure she's up to temperature so we can actually see the coolant temp gauge and everything working. And then what we'll do is then we'll come back and we'll start doing the testing. So just bear with me a second and we'll be back. Right, so now moving on to the actual testing of the harness, and this is going to involve 2 sections. The first one at the top here is kind of just with the ignition on, and the bottom section below is with the actual engine running itself. So I'm going to go through quickly what exactly we are going to test in terms of with just the ignition on and the starting. So starting off, we got immobilizer. So in this case, we've removed the immobilizer from the ECU. We do still wire up the security light. So although it is removed, if someone was to walk past the car, they'd still think there was an immobilizer attached to the ECU. We're going to go through ambient temperature, charge light, oil pressure light, check engine light. So that means the ambient temperature is the temperature outside, and that's displayed on your AC unit there, or your climate control unit there. Then we're going to check oil light, alternator light, and check engine light on the dash itself. Then we're going to test the reverse. So what we're going to do is we're just going to bridge the reverse switch over here, exactly like what your gearbox is going to do. Now, in the case of the IS300, obviously reverse was transmitted via MPX to the cluster. So I'm using the IS200 cluster because that has a buzzer in it that actually buzzes when the reverse switch is intact. And that shows me that the reverse circuit is completely intact from the ECU inside the vehicle. So I know that the reverse lights and everything will work exactly as they should. Speedo we're not going to test because this one's using a gearbox that doesn't have a speed signal that we can do it, so it's not using like an R154 or a W58 or something like that. OBD2 test, nice and simple. We're just going to plug in our OBD2 machine. We are plugged into the standard OBD2 location. Obviously bearing in mind this is a right-hand drive vehicle. Jerry, you also be on the other side there, but same principle applies. You've got your standard OBD2 plug underneath the vehicle there, and that's where you would plug into to read your data. We're just going to log in the machine and make sure that's working exactly as we expect it to. Then we're going to do the AC test. So what I mean by the AC test, there's 2 of them. One, we're going to make the ECU via the machine turn the magnetic clutch relay on from the air conditioning unit. Number 2, we are going to press the AC button inside the car and make sure that the ECU is receiving the signal and acknowledging it and accepting the signal that it receives. Okay. Right, so that is the test there that we're going to carry out with the ignition on. With the engine running, again, a few little tests here. We've got starter circuit. So again, we're just testing that you can put the key in the ignition barrel, go to start it, and it will start. So everything is correct on the wiring on the inside there. Tacho, we're just going to come back and make sure the tacho signal is correct and coming through to the cluster over there. Coolant temp, again, we want to make sure, because the little MPX box is converting the coolant temperature from the GS400 to the IS300, so we want to make sure that it's actually coming through and working. Then we've got ACIS, that's Acoustic Control Induction System. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link in the top here. So you can, I did a little video of exactly how the ACIS system works, what it looks like underneath here, and what it does, and why it's important that you do have it. Just remember, there is a vacuum solenoid valve underneath the intake. I always advise people, because you've got to take the intake off to fit the section that goes underneath the intake. So that's the perfect time to test the solenoid. Remember, the solenoid is polarity sensitive, so you can feed it 12 volts in ground. If it doesn't work, try the other way. If it does work, fantastic. If you try it both ways and it doesn't work, it's time to replace it, because you lose a lot of low down torque when this system is not working. But what I'm going to do is, when it starts up, you're actually going to see this valve close like that, and then we know that's working 100%. Oil control valve, nice and simple. Again, if you watch all other videos, we can use the machine to test both oil control valves, both left and right bank, or bank 1 and bank 2 as they refer to them. And what it'll do is it'll retard the cam a little bit, so effectively it sounds like a lumpy engine for a few seconds while I do the test. So it just proved that they are working and they are adjusting the cams that they're supposed to. Drive-by-wire test, that's nice and simple. We're just literally going to rev the engine. So remember, if you watched the video from earlier about the drive-by-wire system, the first section is not actually attached to the butterfly valve. It's controlled entirely by the motor. If the motor fails, you can hear here. Right, so it does have like a limp mode home type of thing. So in other words, if the motor dies, you can actually put the pedal all the way to the floor, and you have this last little section over here where it actually touches the butterfly valve and moves it, okay? This was Toyota's sort of first foray into drive-by-wire, so they wanted to create like a backup system in case everything went wrong. You could at least still drive the vehicle home. Once this was perfected, you'll see on the 1UZ they moved away from this entirely and just straight drive-by-wire, okay? Right, so drive-by-wire test, injectors and coils. So all we're going to do is I'm going to pull out each injector one at a time, and that's going to then create a misfire, so I know that every single cylinder is firing, and we are happy that everything in terms of the coils and the injectors are wired correctly. All right. And then last but not least, we're going to go through the codes, and we're going to go exactly how you read it, and we'll take a look and we'll see that there are no codes on this vehicle, because obviously we've wired everything in exactly as it should be. The secondary Lambda sensors, obviously that code would take a while to come in. In this case, as you can clearly see, I've not wired in secondary Lambda sensors. So initially we get no codes, but if you didn't plug in that secondary oxygen sensor, after a while you would get that code. But there'll be no other codes specifically related to the automatic gearbox, because we have wired everything in, and that's kind of what we want to demonstrate over there. Okay. Right, so let's jump into the part where we're just going to turn the ignition on. So the first thing you want to do is the immobilizer. Now, I've done quite a few videos on the immobilizer system in relation to other harnesses that we've done. I haven't done one specifically just about that, but in a nutshell, it's going to read the key the second I insert it. And then it's going to activate that. In this case, we've removed the immobilizer, but all the wiring is still intact. So the second I insert the key into here, the light is actually going to go off. Okay, it's going to, that's how it would behave if you had a proper key. And obviously we've removed it, so it doesn't work like that. So as you can see, I'm not even going to turn the key, and you see the flashing LED. As soon as I insert it, it goes off. Okay, just a little hint for you guys, you don't need to turn the key on to actually figure out that your immobilizer is turned off. It does it the second you put your key in there, okay? So that's fine. So we know the immobilizer is off because the light has gone off, okay? Other thing as well, if you do have an immobilizer on an IS300, IS200, or whichever sort of Toyota you want to work with, if the light goes off immediately, that's a master key. If the light stays on for a few seconds and then goes off, that's a valet or a sub key. The reason they do that is the valet / sub keys cannot be used by a machine like this to program other new keys. So as you can imagine, what they've basically done is if you hand in your car to a valet or someone to park it at the airport or so on and so forth, you don't want them to be able to code new keys to your car because they know where your address is. They could drive along, get a key, walk up to your car, steal your car basically, okay? So that's the reason for a sub and a valet key, all right? Just so that you know that, okay? All right, that's gone off again. Okay, if you leave it for too long, just with the ignition on, you can see it's untriggered the B circuit relay and it goes back to being on again. So just bear that in mind if you do that. It will go back off again as soon as you put the ignition on, but yeah, just bear that in mind. Right, okay, so that's the immobilizer. So now we're going to turn the ignition on. And you'll see we've got check engine light, we've got battery light, and we've got oil light. Now these are all being sensed by the ECU, so they're going to work as per normal. Coming over to here, you can see we've got 16 degrees. Obviously this is Celsius because we're in the UK. In America you'd be Fahrenheit, so whatever that is in Fahrenheit. Okay, so that's ambient temp, boom, boom, boom. Right, so let's go over to reverse now. So nice and simple, all we're actually going to do is literally bridge that, and we're going to get a, there you go. So you can see I'm just bridging the two, and we get the beep, so I know that the reverse circuit is completely intact. Just going to get rid of that out of the way now. Right, so that is reverse. Speedo is not applicable. Let's move over to OBD2. So these machines do take a long time to load up, so I have already loaded up, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into function, I'm going to go into system select, and I want you to see that it picks it up. Well, it picks it up as a GS400, which is weird. Okay, but we're going to go back into engine and ECT, but we're going to go there. But anyway, it picks it up as a GS, and it's plugged completely into there. This may be a quirk of my machine, why it picks up as a GS400. I'm not too sure about that. But anyway, no major issue. Right, so we've got OBD2. Right, so AC clutch. So obviously what we want to do now is we want to test the clutch first, and then we want to test the request signal. So firstly, we're going into active test. We're then going to go into AC magnetic clutch relay. Right, if we do that, then we are going to hit the side arrow, and as I do, you're going to hear the actual relay click. Right, I'm going to quickly move the camera over to the other side. So remember, the relay's right there by the ECU box in this case. If you're, you can see just that little box over there. So hopefully 1, 2, 3. Fantastic. Okay, so I know that the ECU is capable of controlling the magnetic clutch relay, so I'm super happy with that. What we're going to do now is we're going to go into data list. And I'm just going to make my own little list. I'm going to remove some of the data because these machines on this K-line is so slow. I'm just going to put engine speed. We're going to put coolant temp. And then we want AC signal. AC signal, there you go. Right, so at the moment you can see we've got AC signal as being off. So all I'm doing is I'm coming in here and I'm going to basically press that button over there, and then what we're going to see is that going to on. So if I come along, hopefully you can see that. AC signal off, AC signal on, AC signal off, AC signal on. Done. Okay, so I'm super happy. The signal from the car to the ECU is being accepted. The ECU is acknowledging that the AC switch is on. The actual ECU is capable of controlling the magnetic clutch relay, so that is all wired correctly, and I'm super happy with that. Okay. Right, so that is all the testing from that particular side over there. Oh, just another thing on the AC side. Remember, it's using all the standard wiring from the IS300, the pressure switch and the all 9 yards. So you do need to have everything else of the AC system completely standard and wired in correctly for it to work. It's looking for all the other signals that it would normally be looking for if it was in a standard Toyota. So please do bear that in mind. All right, so that is that particular section over there. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to jump away. We're going to come back, and then we're actually going to start it up, and then we're going to do all the tests with the engine running itself. So bear with me a second while I do that. Right, so we're back again, and now we're going to do the actual running part. I'm just going to do a quick recap because obviously we've been through the whole other section. You've probably forgotten what we're going to test now. So a quick recap. First of all, starter circuit. Does the vehicle start when we turn the key? Secondly, tacho. Are we getting a signal through here? So we'll quickly go look at that. Also mentioned, we're going to make sure all the lights go off, so oil, battery, and check engine light. Coolant temp, we're going to make sure we get a signal from the coolant temp over there. ACIS, we're going to make sure this little flap goes down here after the engine starts. Oil control valve, we're going to pop over to the machine, we're going to test bank 1 and bank 2 of the oil control valves for the VVT-i, so you'll hear the change in engine note. Drive-by-wire test, we're just going to rev it up. So all we want to make sure is that this first little section here causes the engine to rev. That's what we're looking for, okay? Injectors and coils, I'm going to unplug each coil one by one so we can hear the misfire. And codes, we're going to go through the fact that you shouldn't have any codes on the ECU at all, and it should be running exactly as intended. But just remember the caveat, the secondary oxygen sensor that lives sort of in the middle of the car here, that does need to be plugged in because that is what the ECU is using for the secondary oxygen sensors. Okay, right, so I'm going to get my ear protectors on because it is very loud. I'm going to continue talking through the whole video, so don't stress, but most of the time you guys can hear me, so there's no problem there at all. So let's do this. We're going to jump in. You've got your key into the car, and you start it up. Nice and smooth, so we know the starter's working fine. We can see the tacho's working fine, and we've got there about 900 RPM, and we're just below 1,000 over there, so that's looking good. We've got 55 degrees over there, and we are showing a little bit of coolant temp popping off the needle over there. We'll come back and check that in a minute. We've got ACIS, so you can see the valve has gone down, so we're happy with that. Oil control valve, we're just going to go into active test. Try and see if I can get this to go sideways. Bank 1. Alright, and as I test it, there you go. Let's go into bank 2. There's that one. Okay. Back to data list. Right, so that's the oil control valve. Let's move over to the drive-by-wire, so we're just gonna... There you go. Right, injectors and coils. Let's start with, we're going to start with cylinder 2 over here, so number 2, number 4, number 6, number 8. Right, coming around the other side, number 7, number 5, number 3, and number 1. Right, okay. So that's all the injectors and coils. Obviously we've got no check engine light, we've got no oil light, no battery light. You can see the coolant gauge is now going even more up from there. We can come onto our DTC list over here, and we can see that we have got 0 codes. So we've got no automatic gearbox codes, we've got absolutely nothing at all. Little interesting fact that I'm going to share with you guys now is I'm going to show you how sensitive these mass airflow sensors are. So I'm just going to blow gently onto this map. There you go. Right, so when we do say things like with the mass airflow sensor that you shouldn't have any sort of 90-degree bends directly before or after, that's how sensitive they are. I literally just gently blew on it and it killed the engine. Okay. Brings me to my second point, which is if you try and start it with the MAF plugged in but just dangling in thin air, and you'll be surprised how many people do try it. This is calculating the air coming into the engine, which the ECU is then using to inject the fuel. If you put a MAF not in the airflow, but you plug it in, the ECU thinks there's no air coming into the engine, so it's going to put no fuel. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Like I said, you'll be surprised how many times people just plug in the MAF, leave it dangling here, not actually in the airflow going into the engine, and then wonder why their car doesn't start. Okay, so just a little tip. I do try and drop these in randomly. I know it's not a scripted effort over here, but yeah, I try and drop these in as and when I do it. Right, so coming back to here now, you can see we've got absolutely no codes at all. Now then, as per usual, with the US market, unfortunately, you can't just bridge the 2 terminals, okay, and then get your check engine light codes by flashing them like a Morse code system. Sorry, guys in the US, that's just the way it is. None of your ECUs work like that. Only the Japanese ones and the earlier European ones do. Anyway, so you do need an OBD2 machine of some description that will then get you all of your codes, and you can see the live data exactly like you are seeing here that I am doing, okay? And then just another one is you can still bridge pin 4 and 13 or 5 and 13 of the OBD2 port to put it into diagnostics mode, okay? The reason I say that is because you can still carry out the other functions. What are the other functions? Kind of only one really that's useful to you is the ability to check the timing. So you can use a timing light. Okay, a lot of guys think that's only for old carb motors, but they're still useful on these. You can use a timing light. You've got your 0, 5, 10, and 15 degree marks on your crank cover over there. On your crank pulley, if you have a look down there, there's your mark. So you can see I've used I think I call it Tipex correction fluid or whatever. It's just nice and useful to mark out these things so you can see them with a light. It's really nice when you have a flashing light. These pop up really nicely to see. But if you bridge those two terminals, you're going to lock the timing at 10 degrees. So effectively, if you think that maybe the cam timing is a little bit off, again, nice and simple, bridge those two terminals, grab your timing light, as hopefully it'll read just on the wires, mine does. Check the timing, make sure it's at 10 degrees. Most importantly, don't leave the paper clip in there, because as you can imagine, it locks timing at 10 degrees. It just thinks you're in diagnostic mode wanting to check something. Okay, right, so don't leave it on. You're gonna have a bad time because you have a very low power engine. Right, so in terms of testing the engine running, I've tested everything here. I'm super happy with it. So what we need to do now is, Jerry, we're gonna get this off, get it in a box and get it back to you in the States so you can get your car running, all right? If any of you do have any questions that you would like to ask, again, please feel free to comment down below. If there's anything you'd like to know, we do read the comments, and anything you guys ask me, I'll put in the next video. Again, I don't really know what to put in unless you guys tell me what you want to know to put in. I do throw in little tidbits every now and again, like how sensitive the maths are, etc., etc. Oh, by the way, this is from Calvin Glover. So I know, Jerry, you're in the United States, so you should be able to get some from our good friend Brandon Elsner, who runs Quantum Auto. He'll probably be able to hook you up with something like this if you do need a particular mount for your mass airflow sensor, if you're not using an original airbox. For the guys in the UK, we do stock some of these for Calvin. And again, like I said, if you guys want us to stock more stuff from Calvin, either get in touch with Calvin, get in touch with myself. We can arrange for his items to be stocked here in the UK, that you guys can then just buy them directly from here. So it's really nice, easy shipping, no customs or any of that type of jazz to deal with. All right. But thanks for watching, guys. And Jerry, let's get this off to you so you can get your job done. And again, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.